Your file shows no kills, Bond. But to become a 00, it takes 2.
Movie lovers all over the world never cease to gush about Casino Royale, and all with good reason. The entire James Bond franchise consistently leaves the audience completely fascinated. So, it was only right that the producers decided to reboot the franchise and cast a new actor as James Bond to give the franchise the little boost it needed. The 2006 film wasn't just any James Bond reboot, it was a whole movement that redefined Bond. However, behind all the poker tables and iconic one-liners, there might be a few facts you probably didn't know. Let's get right into 20 such facts. Number 20. Casino Royale had a complicated journey before making it to the big screen. Ian Fleming had always been a big fan of the world of filmmaking. Little did he know that his first James Bond novel, Casino Royale, would have a very complicated journey before it would ever become an official Eon production film. To start things off, Casino Royale had a long road. Fleming first sold the rights for just $600 to producer Gregory Ratoff, who then sold them to CBS. CBS then paid another $1,000 for the rights to the 1953 novel, and then adapted it into a 1954 episode of the TV show Climax, which oddly reimagined Bond as an American agent played by Barry Nelson. This episode basically discarded most of the plot due to time constraints. Still, Ratoff paid another $6,000 to retain the film rights in perpetuity. After Ratoff passed away, those rights later passed to producer Charles Feldman, who wanted to adapt the novel with producers like Albert Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman. However, they unfortunately declined because they were wary after a previous experience with producer Kevin McClory on Thunderball. Feldman wasn't sure he could compete with the Eon franchise, so he decided to turn the novel into a comedy instead. This resulted in the 1967 film, which was a parody of the Bond series, starring David Niven and Peter Sellers. The film rights to Casino Royale later went to Columbia Pictures. Despite Cubby Broccoli's best attempts to secure them, they remained there until Sony Pictures Entertainment acquired them in 1989. This led to a legal battle with MGM, the home of the Bond franchise, but a settlement was reached in 2001, with MGM trading its Spider-Man film rights to Sony in exchange for the rights to Casino Royale. Sony purchased MGM in 2005, allowing them to finally distribute the film they had fought so hard to get. Number 19. Miss Moneypenny and Q are missing in Casino Royale. In the 2006 James Bond film Casino Royale, two familiar characters from the franchise, Miss Moneypenny and Q, otherwise known as Major Boothroyd, do not appear. This was an intentional choice that stayed true to Ian Fleming's original Casino Royale novel, where those characters were also absent. Instead, M, the head of MI6, is assisted by a new character named Villiers, played by the actor Tobias Menzies. Villiers plays the role of a secretary and a close assistant to M. For instance, he is the one who informs M that James Bond is the best poker player in the British Secret Service. Due to this, Bond is ultimately chosen for the mission of bankrupting Le Chiffre and forcing his defection, even though Bond is already personally involved in the operation. Weirdly, Villiers was named in honor of automotive engineer Amherst Villiers, who created the 4.5-liter blower Bentley, which was driven by 007 in Ian Fleming's original novels. This powerful car in Ian Fleming's Bond novel was nicknamed by Bond as the Locomotive. Another weird coincidence here is that actor James Villiers played another MI6 character, Bill Tanner, in the 1981 Bond film For Your Eyes Only. Also, Tobias Menzies, who plays Villiers in Casino Royale, later portrayed Fleming himself in the 2010 British drama Any Human Heart. Number 18. Minimal CGI was used. Following the chaotic use of CGI in Die Another Day, the filmmakers intentionally decided to take another direction in the making of Casino Royale. According to Daniel Craig, the only digital effects used were to remove safety wires, notably during the parkour chase scene, and also to blend the Venetian palazzo into the city in the finale. During the development stage, Quentin Tarantino showed great interest in directing this film. However, his ideas of setting it in the 1960s with Pierce Brosnan returning as Bond in a black-and-white film were rejected. The producers were eager to reboot the franchise, but they needed a fresh start, which is why they rejected Tarantino's proposal. There was still a consideration to bring Brosnan back for a fifth film, but the producers thought he was too expensive and also getting too old for the role. Matthew Vaughn, who directed Daniel Craig on Layer Cake, was also considered as director, but they thought he didn't have enough experience. At the end, the producers decided to go with Martin Campbell, the man who had previously introduced a new Bond, Pierce Brosnan, in GoldenEye. At first, Daniel Craig turned down the role. He thought the franchise was getting stale. However, he changed his mind after reading the script and loving its darker and grittier tone. His casting choice didn't go down well with fans of the franchise. It sparked controversy among fans who began to complain that he was James Blonde, but these critics were silenced once the film was released. Number 17. The parkour scene is more iconic than you realize. The opening parkour chase in Casino Royale is one of the film's most iconic and thrilling action sequences, and it took a whole 6 weeks to film. In the scene, James Bond is seen chasing a bomb maker through a construction site, and the man he is after is played by Sebastian Foucan, one of the original creators of parkour. What are the odds that they got that to happen? Foucan's real-life expertise brought an authentic and high-energy movement to the scene, thereby setting a whole new standard for the Bond franchise. What's even more fascinating is that the dramatic Aston Martin barrel roll stunt earned a place in the Guinness World Records for the most cannon-assisted car rolls, which was 7 in total. During early tests, the stunt team made use of a ramp to flip BMWs at speeds of 65 to 70 miles per hour. However, the Aston Martin DBS was so stable at high speeds that even a larger ramp couldn't flip it. To solve this problem, the team installed a powerful air cannon behind stunt driver Adam Curley. It was then that the cannon provided the force needed to launch the car into the record-setting roll it achieved. Another memorable scene that weirdly set a defining image for Daniel Craig was when Bond emerged from the ocean. This was unplanned. The script called for him to swim ashore, but Craig hit a sandbank and simply stood up. This was a surprising moment that created the film's most memorable marketing image. What viewers didn't see was the dozens of paparazzi off-camera, held at bay by the crew, as they attempted to get a shot of Craig. Number 16. Imagine Casino Royale without Daniel Craig. One weird fact that might keep you wondering what if is the fact that, before Craig was cast, there was a list of other names being considered for the role. The producers considered stars like Orlando Bloom, Gerard Butler, Ewan McGregor, Dominic West, Sam Worthington, and Carl Urban. These names were serious considerations for the role, and actors like Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman were even offered the role, but they both declined. The only other actor that was seriously considered for the role of 007, alongside Daniel Craig, was Henry Cavill, but they ultimately thought that he might be too young for the role, since he was just 22 years old at the time. While the role of Bond was a serious toss-up of names, the same could be said about the role of Vesper Lynd. There were many A-list actresses approached for the role, from Angelina Jolie to Miranda Richardson and Charlize Theron, but they all declined, or were later thought to be unsuitable for the role. Even though Eva Green initially rejected the role, she was concerned about how underwritten the role was, and she feared that the Bond girl stereotypes would only affect her career. However, the filmmakers never gave up on her. They listened to Daniel Craig and decided to rewrite Vesper as Bond's intellectual equal. This revised approach was what convinced Green to finally join production in February 2006. Number 15. Casino Royale broke Bond traditions. Casino Royale wasn't just another Bond film, it was the beginning of a bold reinvention of the James Bond franchise, and it was a wrecking ball to break all the long-standing traditions. It became the first film since Dr. No to let go of the customary flirtatious title sequence of Bond girls, and it went for a more minimalist and thematically driven opening that reflected the film's darker tones and themes. The film also broke tradition by removing the iconic gun barrel sequence at the very beginning and placing it after the opening sequence instead. The film also goes away from the novel. In the novel, Bond plays baccarat, but the movie switches it to a more modern and globally familiar game of Texas Hold'em poker. This was the film's way of updating the central casino game without taking it out entirely. Changing the high-stakes game of baccarat featured in the novel to the modern high-stakes card game was a bold move that paid off for the franchise. Another major way Casino Royale moved away from tradition was the portrayal of Vesper Lynd's passing. In the book, her passing is quiet and somber, but the film makes it far more dramatic and emotional. While these are quite two different differences in tone, both the novel and the film stood on using this moment as a turning point. This was the emotional wound that drove Bond forward in his mission for vengeance and justice, setting the stage for the tough Bond we all know. Number 14. Cameos you missed in Casino Royale. In the 2006 Casino Royale, there are several surprising and subtle cameos scattered throughout the film that many viewers didn't catch on to. For one, director Martin Campbell, who also directed GoldenEye in 1995, made a quick appearance as a fuel tanker driver at Miami International Airport. In the scene, his character's life is taken away when the terrorist, played by Claudio Santamaria, breaks his neck. Another cameo that most viewers missed is from Sir Richard Branson, the founder of Virgin. He briefly appears to be frisked by airport security during the Miami airport sequence. Another cameo is that of Gunther von Hagens, known for his Body Worlds exhibitions, who made a vocal cameo during a scene at one of his exhibits set in Miami. The one way to spot him is to look out for his signature hat, which gives him away. Another surprising cameo belongs to one of the film's producers, Michael G. Wilson, who plays a Montenegrin police chief. His character is tricked by René Matis to remove him from the scene, suggesting that he has connections to the villain, Le Chiffre. Behind the scenes, Wilson was put to very good use as he helped advise on the poker scenes, especially the Texas Hold'em games. It gets even better because at one point in the film, there's a man from the Treasury waiting in M's office while she contacts Bond. Many fans thought Wilson played the character, but it turns out it was Phil Mayhew, the film's director of photography. The icing on the cake with these cameos is Brazilian supermodel Alessandra Ambrosio, who makes a quick cameo as one of the tennis players admiring James Bond in Nassau. Number 13. A familiar face from Thunderball returns in Casino Royale. In Casino Royale, there is a scene where James Bond, played by Daniel Craig, beats Alex Dimitrios, played by Simon Abkarian, in a poker game at the Ocean Club in the Bahamas. In that scene, an older woman sits next to Dimitrios at the table, played by Diane Hartford, who wasn't in her first rodeo in a Bond movie. Over 40 years ago, Hartford appeared briefly in 1965's Thunderball. She was a woman Bond at a time when Sean Connery played Bond. In that Thunderball scene all those years ago, Bond was trying to evade a deadly Spectre assassin called Fiona Volpe, played by Luciana Paluzzi, and to blend in, he grabbed an innocent woman from the crowd and danced with her. That woman was Hartford. She even jokingly accused Bond of being married when Fiona interrupted them. The invisible strings of this whole scene in Thunderball and its connection to Casino Royale over 4 decades later are mind-blowing. It gets even weirder because Diane Hartford, who was born Diane Brown, was married to millionaire Huntington Hartford from 1962 to 1970. He just so happened to own Paradise Island in the Bahamas, including the Ocean Club, where Casino Royale was filmed. He previously granted permission for Thunderball to shoot there, and that earned him a special credit at the end of the film. Number 12. One of Casino Royale's biggest stunts had to be rebuilt from scratch. For one of Casino Royale's most dangerous and iconic stunts, where a massive fuel tanker crashes through a bus full of people, the crew spent a whole week setting everything up. The pressure was on because they had only one shot to get it right. The stunt driver, Lee Morrison, had to speed at full throttle while a special effects technician was in charge of setting off a nitrogen-powered cannon that would ensure the launch of the bus into the air. The cannon had a built-in half-second delay, so the timing had to be precise and perfect. However, during the first attempt, the cannon was set off just a split second too early. and the bus visibly lifted off just before the tanker made contact. The footage was rushed to director Martin Campbell in Venice for review, but he said it was unusable, so the crew had to start over completely. They had to rebuild the entire stunt setup from the ground up, which took another full week. Luckily for them, the second attempt went perfectly, and that is the version that made it into the film. It makes you wonder what would have happened if they had never been able to make it work. What if they spent another week trying to nail it, and it just didn't work out, and we never got that iconic scene? Number 11. Chris Cornell's You Know My Name was a unique James Bond song. One rare detail about Casino Royale involves Chris Cornell's catchy and electric theme song, You Know My Name, which debuted in December 2006 and then climbed to number 79 on the US charts, making a solid impression despite the fact that it broke several James Bond traditions. The weird part about it is that the track was not included in the official Casino Royale soundtrack album. This was a surprising move, and it was also the first time in the entire Bond franchise history that the title theme song was excluded from the original soundtrack release. Another weird part about the theme song is that, unlike most James Bond theme songs, which typically infuse the movie title into their lyrics, You Know My Name never actually mentions the film's title, Casino Royale. This made it stand out among the crowd of other James Bond soundtracks of the past. If you think about Goldfinger, Skyfall, or The World Is Not Enough, they all had it intertwined together. However, Cornell's contribution this time with his song didn't include the film's title in the lyrics. The last time a title song skipped this was in 1983 with Octopussy. Looking further back, there have been a few Bond films with title themes that didn't feature the lyrics at all, such as the instrumental themes in Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Even with all of this in mind, it remains clear that Cornell's song is unique and fits the bold new direction of Casino Royale. Number 10. Solange's iconic entrance in Casino Royale was done in pain. With Casino Royale, it is now expected that each Bond girl will have a mind-blowing and unforgettable entrance, even if she isn't necessarily a female lead. To honor tradition, that was exactly what happened when the audience met Solange, the elegant and lonely wife of villain Alex Dimitrios. Italian actress Caterina Marino played Solange Dimitrios, and her entrance was most definitely iconic. Solange made her debut riding a horse along the sun-kissed shores of Nassau, Bahamas. It was a great scene that showcased beauty, glamour, and an iconic aesthetic. Funny enough, early reports mistakenly identified her as the wife of Le Chiffre, the film's main antagonist, and this added more mystery about her character. What you might not know is that the actress who played Solange, Caterina Marino, was suffering from leg pain during the shoot. Due to the pain she was feeling, the production team considered bringing in a stunt double to film the horseback sequence. However, Marino was more than determined to walk every step in her iconic Bond girl moment. So she pushed through the pain and the discomfort and completed the scene herself. The scene became one of the most visually appealing and memorable introductions in Bond history, and it probably helped that it was filmed at the stunning Albany Golf and Beach Club on New Providence Island, which also happens to have served as the location for Dimitrios' lavish beachfront home. Number 9. The man who won an Oscar for Titanic almost missed Bond forever. Peter Lamont had a very humble beginning with his journey into the James Bond franchise. He was first hired as a draftsman on Goldfinger by the legendary designer Sir Ken Adam. Then, with time, he managed to work his way up to becoming the go-to production designer for the Bond series, and he started this journey with For Your Eyes Only. Lamont was an all-rounder. He didn't just design suave spy sets. He also collaborated with James Cameron on science fiction blockbusters such as Aliens in 1986 and Titanic in 1997. The irony of it all is that while Titanic earned him an Academy Award for Best Art Direction, it also cost him a spot on the Bond film Tomorrow Never Dies, which was shooting at the same time. Originally planning to retire after Die Another Day, Lamont changed his mind after he was lured back in when GoldenEye director Martin Campbell made his return for Casino Royale. Campbell recalled how essential Lamont's role was in GoldenEye, and in turn, Lamont saw the origin story of Bond's 00 status as the perfect swan song. Designing Casino Royale was not an easy task, and it took Lamont to places like Nassau and Venice, as well as Barrandov Studios in the Czech Republic, where many soundstage scenes were filmed. Unfortunately, his retirement was bittersweet. While dismantling the film's Venetian Palazzo set, a fire destroyed the famous Albert R. Broccoli 007 stage at Pinewood Studios. To top it all off, Lamont hoped he would return for Quantum of Solace, but Dennis Gassner replaced him. Number 8. Bond's new boss was supposed to be fired, but one line changed everything. When the James Bond franchise was rebooted with Casino Royale, a stream of fresh ideas began to flow, and it was certain that the producers intended to start afresh. They wanted a new Bond, new villains, and a whole new supporting cast. This meant that even other iconic roles like M were set to be recast, mainly because the new Bond, played by Daniel Craig, was much younger. However, the director Martin Campbell, who had previously introduced Judi Dench as the first ever female M in GoldenEye, loved what she had done with the character. So much so that he insisted on carrying her over from the previous continuity and expanding her role with numerous scenes throughout the whole film. So not only did Dench return, but her role was also increased significantly. Campbell gave her more screen time and added more layers to her personality. She now has a sharper tongue, a non-nonsense attitude, and other personality traits which some critics did not like. It didn't matter what the critics thought about Campbell's additions to the character. He was invested in taking the character in new directions, whether that was through her sassy attitude or foul mouth. And while the critics hated it, this character continued through the directors who succeeded Campbell. M was even given an on-screen husband who was portrayed by the film's Czech transportation coordinator, Jiří Husak. Number 7. Why Casino Royale's opening looks like an old spy movie. The black and white pre-credits sequence of Casino Royale is often believed to symbolize how James Bond only starts to become the character that audiences are familiar with after he is appointed as 007. This is the moment James Bond truly becomes the 007 we all know, and it is meant to show his transformation into the iconic character after earning his license. However, in reality, the idea came from cinematographer Phil Mayhew, who wanted to catch the audience off guard. He intentionally styled the opening to look like old-school spy films from the 1960s. Spy films like 1965's The Spy Who Came In From the Cold and 1967's Reflection in a Golden Eye. Mayhew even took inspiration from Don't Look Now for Vesper Lynd's iconic red dress. He wanted Bond to be able to spot her easily as she moved through Venice. To achieve the vintage look, the team shot the opening using 6,000 feet of Eastman XX 5,222 black and white film, which translates to an hour and 6 minutes of raw footage, filmed at 24 frames per second. Originally, the pre-credits sequence was even longer. It depicted Dryden's contact, Fisher, at a cricket match in Lahore, Pakistan, realizing that James Bond is observing him. After a short chase, the sequence would have played out as seen in the final film with the brutal fight set inside the cricket pavilion. The additional scenes were shot but cut from the film due to time and pacing reasons. Number 6. The Madagascar chase scene was filmed at a failed Bahamas resort, tied to classic Bond history. You've got sharp eyes if you noticed this one, but if you didn't, here's a little fact that you might find weird. The construction site where James Bond chases Malacca in Casino Royale isn't in Madagascar after all. It is part of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force Coral Harbor Base in Nassau, the Bahamas. That sand construction site was once meant to be an expansion of the Coral Harbor Hotel. However, the project was never completed, and the cost of the expansion ultimately bankrupted the resort. It gets even more interesting because the main hotel building, which was built in the 1950s, has deep Bond roots. Turns out, it served as Bond's hotel in Thunderball, and the pool area also represented the Café Martinique, where Bond and Domino dined before the foghorn of Disco Volante called her away. The pool and its surroundings were virtually unrecognizable when they were later transformed into a shantytown for the mongoose and snake fight in Casino Royale. The Bond filmmakers often returned to the location after Thunderball, most notably to film Derek Medding's miniature of the Liparus supertanker from its rooftop for The Spy Who Loved Me in 1977. That crumbling construction site in Casino Royale isn't only part of a bankrupt hotel, it's also a hidden landmark in Bond movie history. Number 5. Daniel Craig changed the shower scene. One of the most emotionally charged scenes that resonated with thousands of viewers in Casino Royale is that quiet moment when James Bond comforts Vesper Lynd after the Treasury agent has been forced to assist 007 in eliminating Lord's Resistance Army leader Stephen O'Bannon to ensure their safety, marking a key turning point in their relationship. In this scene, Bond joins her without any hesitation and gently comforts her. This moment humanizes both characters. However, this scene wasn't originally written this way. In the script, Vesper was supposed to be in her underwear, already waiting in the shower. This was a familiar trope in most Bond films that would have taken an intimate route rather than an emotional one. Daniel Craig didn't want to follow the usual pattern. He thought it was completely out of character for Vesper to stop and undress after such a traumatic experience due to her sense of guilt. The director, Martin Campbell, completely agreed with Craig's thought process, and together they made a huge change to keep her clothed. Eva Green performed the scene exactly that way, and they nailed it in just one take. Taking Craig's suggestion helped to preserve Vesper's dignity, and the scene became iconic, and it was also a foundation for the tragic love story that followed. Number 4. This Bond scene was so brutal, it cracked the set. One of the most mind-blowing and unforgettable scenes in Casino Royale is when Le Chiffre tries to obtain James Bond's winnings from the Casino Royale by stripping him naked, tying him to a chair, and torturing him. This was one of the most defining moments in Ian Fleming's novel. Due to that, it was an unusual and discomforting scene even for a Bond film. However, the producers insisted that the scene be left as it was. They wanted to remain true to the spirit of Fleming's work and the character of Bond on his journey to becoming the polished agent of the earlier films. To protect Daniel Craig during the intense shoot, the crew placed a thick plate of glass beneath the chair. However, things got a little too real. Mads Mikkelsen was fully in the zone as he embodied the unhinged desperation of Le Chiffre, and in so doing, he hit the glass with the rope so hard that it cracked. Filming had to be stopped immediately, so the safety equipment could be checked and replaced. The scene remained in the movie. It was raw and super devoted to the source material. Number 3. Daniel Craig was a controversial choice for Bond. This isn't just a weird fact, it is also a surprising one. Daniel Craig remains one of the most controversial casting choices for the role of James Bond, and this notion causes a divide between fans. His casting in Casino Royale created such a fuss that the paparazzi came on the production set whenever they could. Craig's emergence from the crystal blue sea on New Providence Island was deliberately meant to recall Andrus's entrance as Honey Rider in Dr. No, and Halle Berry's introduction as Jinx in Die Another Day. However, out of shot, the crew were trying desperately to keep the press away as they tried to take pictures of the new Bond. The press was so unhinged while Craig was stepping into his new role that they even took to the water in boats, trying to interfere with filming. This was one of the moments that made it clear that hiring Craig wasn't the ideal choice that would have made everyone happy. However, his performance silenced all the critics, making him one of the best Bonds. He even became an international sex symbol after certain scenes on that same beach. Number 2. The poker chips can still be purchased today. One thing about Casino Royale that can never be criticized is the sophistication. Everything from the suits to the set design screamed sophistication, and that also extended to the high-stakes poker game that was the soul of the film. The production team made it their mission to source only the best playing cards and poker chips for Bond's intense face-off with Le Chiffre. These sleek, custom-designed items were created by Cartamundi, a prestigious Belgian company known worldwide for producing premium-quality cards and gaming accessories. Even to this day, movie fans and collectors of explicit James Bond merchandise can obtain duplicates of the playing cards and chips designed specifically for the film. However, because Cartamundi no longer sells the items, they have collector's value, and interested parties must spend a little more time and money exploring the internet for copies. Number 1. The Casino Estoril in Lisbon was an inspiration. This fact dives into the inspiration of Casino Royale. As it turns out, the fictional Casino Royale in Montenegro plays a huge role in the plot of the film and the original novel. What many fans don't know is that Ian Fleming drew inspiration for this glamorous gambling setting from a real place called Casino Estoril in Portugal. The casino is located in the seaside town of Estoril, near Cascais, and this spot was one of the biggest and most sophisticated casinos in Europe. During World War II, it became a hotspot for spies, diplomats, and exiled royalty. German intelligence agents were also known to be frequent flyers of the casino, and they would mix with Allied spies and create an environment that was filled with intrigue and the kind of tension that Fleming channeled into his first Bond novel, Casino Royale. Fleming visited Casino Estoril himself during his time as a British naval intelligence officer. Even though he never had much of the best luck at tables, he still got fortune through the narrative the casino inspired. The casino was the perfect mix of risk and high-stake games, and that aura stuck with him and eventually formed the foundation of Bond's cinematic gambling exploits. Unlike the fact that Fleming lost in casinos, the success of the Bond franchise would bring him jackpots for the rest of his life. The world of Casino Royale was one of seductive espionage, gambling, and jaw-dropping action. The on-screen action stole the hearts of many, but the off-screen stories are just as memorable. From the long journey Casino Royale went on before making it to the big screen, to Daniel Craig's controversial casting and the record-breaking stunts, the film wasn't just a reboot of the popular franchise, it was a redefinition of what a James Bond film should be. Which of these weird facts do you find fascinating? Share in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.